Hi guys, Romans here and welcome to the first review in 2022, and it's going to be the Progressive Souls Collective, which is essentially a project, and their debut album Sonic Birth. Whenever I'm reviewing an artist who's approximately on the same level as me in terms of the fame and exposure and numbers, I don't usually promote myself, I go straight to the point. So it's the same with this project. The mastermind behind the whole project, Florian, who wrote all the music and who plays the guitars, he reached out to me like 3 months ago, but at that point I was still very heavily in the process of finalizing my second album, Pursuits in Life 2, so I didn't really have much time, but a couple weeks ago I remembered it and decided to check the album out. I've heard it 7 times since then, but it's important to say that this is a record that came out in 2020. And I very rarely review records outside of a current year, but if you watch my channel you know that I wouldn't have reviewed an album if I didn't have most of positive things to say about it. That's the case. The album came out in 2020. Physically, it was released in 2021. And well, my review is going to be from 2022. So yeah, let's dive right into the review.
Music review. Music review.
Before I start with individual tracks, there are actually some pretty impressive names on this record. So the synths, the keyboards, and like the looping and programming is done by Kevin Moore, the former Dream Theater's keyboard player who played on their first 3 albums. And then he was replaced by Derek Sherinian for one record, and that keyboard player plays on this album as well. So I think that they mentioned in their PR that basically this is probably the only record having both of them playing together. It also has Connor Green, the Haken's bass player, and even the drummer and the percussionist, they're quite famous. They played with a lot of famous people. The album opens up with an instrumental track called Metatur. Not sure if I pronounced it right. It has that electronic beginning, and I do have to say that the production is really great, even though this album basically doesn't sound any differently than gazillion of other progressive metal records, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that the production is fantastic, and it really is a very pleasant album to listen to, sonically. The first track with the vocals is the second one, A Comfortable Darkness. And one of the selling points of the record is that it combines progressive metal with like world music and ethno music, stuff like that. There's not too much of it to the point where this record would kind of like be in a genre of its own, but still all these elements make for a nice addition, and it makes the record stand apart. This track is basically like a world music meets prog metal in a way.
Comfortable darkness surrounding me.
Killing True Beliefs has exactly that ethno beginning, and I think it's really cool. When it gets heavy, we've got this very, very interesting melody that's both powerful and strange. Whenever I'm listening to it, it's so tense, it's so urgent, but at the same time, the melody goes in a way that I personally would never kind of sing it or write it in that way as a songwriter, and that's why it keeps me on my toes, and I'm like, that's interesting, that's strange at the same time, but I like it. It's that strangeness that makes this for one of the most memorable moments on the record. Fractional Emotions continues in a similar way. There are a couple of musical moments that remind me of Dream Theater, but apart from it, maybe apart from certain Devin Townsend comparisons, this album pretty much does its own thing. A A Formula for Happiness is a more laid-back track. I really like the groovy first half of it, and then we get some of the gospel and world music elements. Inner Circle is a shorter track where we hear some of those classical Kevin Moore loops and electronic sounds, and it seems like he's got his own sound palette that he keeps using. And I remember it's been a long time, but I listened to OSI quite a lot back in the day, and some of these sounds actually remind me of that. You and Me Alone is probably the only track that really goes for something totally different than the rest of the record. The violins and the overall Irish folk vibe. It kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, especially if you think about the Shire theme. And I really like it. We even get some female vocals, and generally this makes for a very emotional moment, which again is something very different from anything we could hear so far. One of my favorite tracks on the album is Hurt, and it's especially that horn section. It just makes everything better. I also like some harsh vocals towards the end, which again add some more variety to the record. Destiny Included is this over 15 minutes long epic of the album. The chorus is not really that obvious. And I would say that generally none of the sections really stand out, but as a whole composition, it flows very nicely and it works. Mine Treasures serves as an interlude.
Everything's on file. Love without an extra mile. Paperwork is signed. Love still justified.
The final track with Others revisits the main chorus from A Formula for Happiness, so it's almost like this going the whole circle and closing the album in a relatively satisfying way. To sum up, I really enjoyed this album. I do have to say the first time I heard it, I didn't really like it, and I didn't really feel like revisiting it. You shouldn't really judge an album by one listening or even by like 4 or 5. You should really give it some time and give it a chance. And this is probably the best example of that. This record has very few really big, accessible choruses, melodies, sections, or licks or whatever. Even it doesn't really have many riffs. So it's not very graspable, and it's very, very inaccessible in a way, you know. So this is both a huge advantage and a disadvantage of this record, because the disadvantage being that it will take time until you start finding all those little moments that will make you keep coming back to it. But at the same time, if it had all those expected riffs and big choruses and melodies and whatnot, it probably wouldn't really be any different from majority of other prog metal albums. So it really makes it stand on its own. And one thing that really makes this record great, in my opinion, is that the repeated listenings are rewarding, and this is very important. Now, progressive music is in general very challenging, but you know, I like when people say, "Oh, Dream Theater is so challenging to listen to." I don't really think so. You know, maybe it's just me having heard around 4,000 records in my life, but I don't really think Dream Theater is that challenging. I mean, if you want a challenging band, go and listen to Gentle Giant. But this record was challenging even for me. So if you like some complex and not very obvious stuff, you should definitely check this record out. I like that it tries something new and something different. It doesn't deviate too much from the formula, but enough for it to be interesting. And I think that's the best you can hope for today. One thing I was not necessarily a big fan of are the vocals. I am by no means saying that the lead singer isn't good or anything. Actually, his vocal performance is very impressive, and as a singer, I know that these tracks are pretty difficult to sing. But when I heard the album for the first time, and I didn't really know anything about the musicians on it, and I didn't really check them out, I actually thought that the singer was some kind of a 50 or 60-year-old dude whose voice was totally worn out and who basically had his singing career behind him. But no, this is actually a young singer. I'm not really sure if this is a very healthy way how to sing. I'm not sure how he's going to sound 30 years from now. And his voice sounded very often pushed and forced, almost as if he was out of his comfort zone singing these tracks. Of course, it's an acquired taste. I think that his voice is very distinguishable, so that's great. It's better than to sound like anybody. Generally, I've gotten used to it, and I think that still it's impressive what he does on the record. It's just that I wasn't a big fan of the tone of his voice, so to speak. If you are the Progressive Souls Collective fan and you never heard about me, be sure to check out my debut album Pursuits in Life. You can find all the information and all the links on my YouTube channel. Have you heard this album already? If you have, you can let me know in the comment section below whether you agreed or disagreed with me. If you discovered this project thanks to me, you can let me know as well. You can follow me on Facebook or on Instagram. You can find the both links in the comment section. You can find the links to both. Oh, I forgot. Also, if you like this review, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe. You can check out my own original music, my live performances, my worst to best series, and quite a lot of other series and reviews as well. Thanks a lot for watching.